Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Moneybag 73 channel. I came across this show that I want to recommend to everyone. I think a lot of you really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. I think that AJ did a great job on this Art Bell Archive live show that he did. He plays lots of background music, which I particularly like, and I really enjoyed the show, so I want to recommend it to everyone. Those of you who don't know Art Bell, he was the founder and original host of the Coast to Coast AM paranormal show on the radio all across the world that was real popular in the 90s. So what AJ has done is he's gone through the archives looking for things having to do with the Mandela effect, and he found some really interesting stuff. So I wanted to treat you to just a tiny little bit here of what you're going to get from the show. But you're going to hear in 2001, they were talking about the Mandela effect. So for those people thinking that, oh, well, Fiona Broom on her broomstick, who's a witch and she created all this Mandela effect and blah, blah, blah. Those people they have no idea what they're talking about. Just ridiculous type of comments that I've been hearing over the years. This was being talked about on Coast to Coast 20 years ago. They were talking about Mandela dying. They were talking about people who had died that were alive again. Callers from 2001. You can go back to the old shows. The Mandela effect has been happening probably for millennia. I mean, it's probably been happening for thousands of years. But with the internet, we can now exchange notes and we can share and so. But this has been going on for a long time. But there was a point that it exploded, and then mass awareness. It caught a lot of us. Well, I don't know about mass awareness. I think we're still heading in that direction with the movie coming out and more and more books coming out. And, we're heading in that. We've had the few conferences now. And so it's happening. It's happening, everyone. Maybe not as fast as we thought or wanted or whatever, but it is happening. So for the people that think this is something new or not even happening, this has been happening for a long time. Personally, I think around '09 was the first time I noticed something very clear. The Lucky's grocery store had changed, and because it had gone away, and then Albertsons, I think, bought them out, and they brought the brand back, and I saw Lucky on driving across the front of a store. I saw Lucky, and I'm like, wow, look, Lucky's is back, but they took off the apostrophe s. It was, it hit me. It was very clear what had happened, but I thought that they changed it. So, I didn't think anything of it. I just went on with my life. Then, years later, I found out, well, that was my first Mandela effect. So, you're going to see in 2001 on the Coast to Coast show, Art Bell, he's discussing the Mandela effect, before it was named. So, early in 2001, a caller was discussing quantum computers as well. It's interesting to hear what that guy had to say. So in the late 80s and 90s, Art said that someone had called in late 80s, early 90s and asked him about Nelson Mandela. And he said, well, Nelson Mandela died, right? So in the archives somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s is a caller to the show. And Art Bell may have been the first one to say that he thought that he died. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty interesting. So you got to check it out. There's a 2015 clip from Art Bell's show where Cynthia Sue Larson is interviewed on Coast to Coast. That's really interesting. So this is a really good show here that I recommend to everybody. There's also a woman named Starfire Tor, and she was interviewed in 2009 discussing time shifts and saying that she knows the source and nature of time itself. And so anyway, this was just really interesting, and those clips from the old Coast to Coast shows with Art Bell were really good. So let me leave this with you here. I wanted to play this here a tiny bit, and then I'll have a link down below so you can check out the show. But I highly recommend this. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it.
Later on, in 2015, a year after Amazon Echo made its splash, Art Bell had an opportunity to interview Dr. Cynthia Larson on a program he did called Midnight in the Desert. And they discussed reality shifting and the Mandela effect back in 2015. which puts a closer perspective to the discussion and the time frame of when the term Mandela effect became popularized. We'll listen to this and be back in just a few moments on Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
What you research is really, really interesting, and this is how we're going to start it out. I'm not sure if I was the first one, Doctor, but I may have been the first one. This was back in the 80s, back in the 1980s. I actually went on the air. I don't know whether you know this is true or not. You can go back, people can go back and find the show, either the late 80s or early 90s. And somebody called me on the phone. That's what you do on a talk show. And they said, Art, something about Nelson Mandela. And I said, well, Nelson Mandela died, didn't he? I actually said that on the air. And I had never heard anything of a so-called Nelson Mandela effect or Mandela effect before, and maybe it was before that, but it's the first I had ever heard of it. Actually, when I said it on the air, that doesn't mean I was the first to say it. I'm not claiming that. I'm just claiming that's the first I ever heard of it. I thought Nelson Mandela had died.
Right.
And you are actually researching something you call the Mandela effect. Am I right?
Right. Well, it's I've been calling it the alive again phenomena before the term Mandela effect became quite popularized. And because like you, I've been noticing sometimes people, or in my case, a cat had passed away, and then the cat was alive again.